Hi viewers, welcome back to Afri Fashion TV. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to draft a shoulder dart. So if that is something you're interested in, continue watching. Now the first thing I'm going to do is actually to draw a straight line at the top part. So placing my tape at the center fold, I'm going to take my neck width. I'm actually working with a neck width of about 3 inches. So I'm going to mark that. And then I'm going to measure a neck depth of about 4 inches. I'm also going to mark that at this point. So because I want this to be a V-neck, I'm going to use a straight rule to connect the 2 points together. Next, I'm going to take my shoulder measurement. I'm working with a shoulder measurement of 16 inches. If I divide that by 2, I'm going to have 8 inches. So placing my tape at the center fold, I'm going to measure 8 inches. Then I'll mark that right here. From this shoulder line, I'm going to take my burst length. I'm working with a burst length of about 9.5 inches. So I'm going to mark that at this point. Then I'm working with an underbust of 13 inches. I'm also going to mark that at this point. And a waist length of about 16 inches. So I'll mark that at this point. And then my ½ inch seam allowance. Alright, next I'm going to draw a straight line across the various marks. Now at this bust line, I'm going to impute my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. I'm working with a nipple to nipple measurement of 8 inches. If I divide that by 2, I'm going to have 4 inches. So I'm going to mark that right here. Then at the underbust, I'm going to reduce my nipple to nipple measurement by ½ inch. So placing my tape at the center fold, I'm going to mark 3.5 inches. I'm also going to impute the same 3.5 inches at the waistline. Then I'm going to connect the 3 points together. Then I'm going to measure what I have between the neck width and the shoulder measurement. I have about 5 inches. So I'm going to divide that by 2 and I will have 2.5 inches. I'm going to mark that right here. So I'm going to connect that mark to this mark here at the bust point. So now I'm going to impute my darts. At this on the bust line, I'm going to measure 2 inches to the right. I will be taking all my dart on the right. So placing my tape here, like this, at this mark, I will measure 2 inches to the right. I'm also going to take the same measurement at the waistline, like this. Then I'm going to connect the points using a straight line, like this. Alright, then I'm going to connect this point to my bust point using my curve rule. So placing my rule like this, I'm going to connect the 2 points. Okay, so that is my dot at this part. Good. So moving to the shoulder line, I'm going to take my dot. So I'm actually working with a dot of 2 inches. So placing my tape here at this midpoint, I'm going to measure 2 inches to the right. So I'll just mark that right here. Next, I'm going to connect these 2 inches to the bust point using a curve rule, like so. Moving back to this shoulder line, we're going to replace the 2 inches dot that we are taking away. So to do that, you can just, place your tape at this shoulder mark and measure 2 inches to the right, or you can add 2 inches to your shoulder measurement divided by 2. Remember, for mine, I'm using 8 inches, so I can just add 2 inches to that and it will give me 10 inches. So placing my tape at the center fold, I'm just going to measure 10 inches like this. So I'll mark that right here. So this is going to be a new shoulder mark. Now at that point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch to create my shoulder slope. Then I'm going to connect that mark to the neck width, like this. So at this shoulder slope, I'm going to take my armhole depth. To actually do that, you want to divide your breast circumference by 6 plus 1.5 inches. I'm working with a breast circumference of 39 inches. If I divide that by 6 plus 1.5 inches, I'm going to have approximately 8 inches. So placing my tape at this shoulder slope, I'm just going to measure 8 inches down. Alright, so I'll mark that at this point. And to ensure that I'm going to have a straight line, I will just place my tape at the center fold and measure 10 inches like this to correspond to the shoulder measurement at the top. This is optional, but I'm doing this to ensure that I'm going to have a straight line. Now, I'm going to connect this point to the shoulder slope. Next, I'm going to rule a horizontal line to its right. Okay, so I'm going to take the measurement of the armhole depth, which is 8 inches. I will divide that by 2 and create a mark at that point. So if I divide 8 inches by 2, I'm going to have 4 inches. So I'm going to mark that point. Then at that 4 inches mark, I'm going to come in by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to mark that here. All right. This line, is going to be a chest line. Placing my tape at the center fold, I'm going to impute quarter of my breast circumference at the chest line. So if I divide 39 inches by 4, I'm going to have 9.75 inches. So I'm going to mark that here, plus 1 inch seam allowance. So I'll just mark that here. Next, I'm going to connect this point to this point and then to this point using my curve rule. Okay, so that is it. Now I'm going to impute my circumferences. So at this bust point, I'm going to impute quarter of my breast circumference, which is 9.75 inches. So I'll mark that here, 9.75 inches, plus my 1 inch seam allowance. I'll mark that at this point. At my underbust, I'm going to impute quarter of my underbust circumference, which is 31.5 divided by 4. That will give me approximately 7.9 inches. So placing my tape at the center fold, I'm going to measure 7.9 inches. Then I'm going to replace this 2 inches dot that we're taking away at this point. Measure that here. Plus my 1 inch seam allowance. So I replace the dot, 2 inches plus 1 inch seam allowance. Then at the waistline, I'm going to impute quarter of my waist measurement, which is about 7.9 inches approximately. So I'll mark that here. Plus 2 inches dot that I took away at this point. Plus 1 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I'm going to connect the points using a straight rule. So I'm just going to connect them like this. All right. I'm just going to extend these other lines to the allowance line. Like this. Then at this shoulder line, I'm going to impute ½ inch seam allowance. So placing my tape here, I'm going to measure ½ inch upwards. Then Then also placing my tape here, I'm going to measure ½ inch upwards. Then I will connect the 2 points using a straight rule like this. All right. So I'm just going to extend this old line to the allowance line and do the same thing at the neck like this. All right. So that is it for the front bodice. Now I'm going to cut out. Okay, so watch as I'm cutting out. This is it for the front piece. Okay, so for this back piece, I'm going to draft a simple back bodice. Now the first thing I'm actually going to do is to take out my zip allowance. I will be working with a zip allowance of 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to mark that like so. Just mark that like this until I actually get to the end part, or until I get up to about 17 inches. So after marking that down, I'm going to connect the points together. Okay, so I'm going to come down from this top by about 1 inch or 1.5 inches. The essence of actually coming down for me is to ensure that I have enough space at this top part for seam allowance. From this line, which is our zip allowance line, I'm going to take all my measurement. For the front bodice, we took a neck width of about 3 inches. We're going to maintain that. The back and the front neck width has to be the same. The depth can change, but the width must remain the same. Then, for the neck depth, I'm going to measure 1.5 inches. I'm going to connect this using my curve like this. Okay, then I'm just going to use a straight rule to connect it to the zip allowance part. Alright, so it goes like this. Okay. At this line, I'm going to impute half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. So I'll mark that here. At that point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. I'll connect that to the neck width using a slanted line like this. Next, I'm going to create my armhole depth. To do that, just like we did for the front bodice, divide your breast circumference by 6 plus 1.5 inches. For me, I have 8 inches, so I'm going to mark that here. And to ensure that I'm going to get a straight line at the end of the day, I'm going to measure 8 inches here to correspond to the shoulder mark here. That would ensure that I will have a straight line. Next, I'm going to connect this to the shoulder slip like this. I'm going to draw a straight line to the right like this. This is going to be a chest line like so. From this shoulder line, I'm going to impute my breast length, which is 9.5 inches, and my waist length plus seam allowance. So at this back part, we don't actually need on the bust. I'm going to draw a straight line across the marks. So at this bust point, I'm going to impute my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. So I have a nipple to nipple measurement of 8 inches. If I divide that by 2, I'm going to have 4 inches. So mark that there. I'm also going to impute the same value at the waistline, like this. Then I'm going to connect the points using a straight line. For this draft, I'm not actually going to go up like I usually do at this part with about 1.5 to 2 inches. I'll just leave it at this bust point. Now, at this waistline, I'm going to measure ½ inch on both sides like this. Then I'm going to connect it to this bust point like so. Good. Then using a straight line, I'm just going to extend it to the allowance line like this. At this armhole depth, I'm just going to mark the midpoint, which is 4 inches like this. Then from this zip allowance line, I'm going to impute my quarter of my breast circumference, which is 9.75 inches plus 1 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to connect that using my curve rule. At the bust point, I'm going to impute the same value starting from this line, the zip allowance line. I'm going to take quarter of my breast circumference, which is 9.75 inches. So mark that, plus 1 inch seam allowance. I also mark that here. Then at this waistline, I'm going to impute quarter of my waist circumference, which is 7.9 inches. I'll mark that right here. Now, if you notice, I took away 1 inch dot at this point. I'm going to replace it 1 inch, then 1 inch seam allowance. So I'll just mark that. Now I'm going to connect the points together. Like this. Then at this point, I'm just going to use a straight line to connect it to the seam allowance mark. Okay, so at the shoulder part, I'm going to impute 1/2 inch for seam allowance. I'll just measure that there and also measure it here. Then I'm going to connect the two lines, the two marks together. Alright, next I'm just going to join them to the old marks. So to ensure that I'm not going to experience any bulging of the zip, I'm just going to extend this allowance line to the center fold, so you can see like this. Alright, then I'm going to come up by 1 inch like this. Next, I'm going to join this to this end point here using my straight rule, like so. Okay, then next I'm going to come in by 1/2 inch. And then connect it to this neck depth. Now I'm going to cut out. So first I'm going to start from this. So this is it for the back piece.